Do you ever feel like you've got the basics down in your DAW, but producing a whole song takes forever? Maybe you even get stressed out when making music with others because you feel like you're fumbling around and it slows down the creative process? Well, I used to feel like this all the time. I remember being new to producing, watching masterclasses by guys like Ryan Tedder and Louis Bell, amazed at how fast they were working. Well, today I'm going to show you 12 Logic tips that took me from an amateur to a professional producer. And make sure you stick around to the end, because the last tip is really going to make a difference when it comes to your efficiency, and it's going to make your life as a producer much easier. I'm going to show you how I set up and use my template so you can do the same thing. First, let's talk about shortcuts. You probably know the obvious ones like K for turning on and off the click track and R for hitting record, but I really want to show you a couple ones that I use all the time. Say I'm doing a session with an artist and we're just starting to flesh out the arrangement of the song. Instead of copying and pasting all my elements individually from chorus 1 to chorus 2, I can, for example, just hold Option and drag all the elements over. And they copy automatically. A couple of other shortcuts I use all the time are Command T for splitting clips at the playhead, or Control H for hiding stuff if I want to go back to his sound later and I'm not feeling it right now. And that way I can still keep my project organized and looking nice. Another tool that saves me a lot of time, especially when editing vocals, is the Marquee Tool. Say I want to remove breaths or dead space in all my backing vocals. Instead of going through each take, which would take a lot of time, you can simply hold down Command and choose the area you want to cut out, and then you just press Control M to mute that. And just make sure you have selected the Marquee Tool as the second tool up here. And after that, you can just go over and fade in on every clip at the same time. Editing vocals the slow way really adds up over a whole song, so make sure you use this tip. Now, let's talk about effect sense. Having your effects on sense really saves a lot of processing power, especially if you're using the same effect on multiple tracks. Let's say I'm doing a reverb on a vocal, for example, and by having the reverb on a send, I can actually process that effect without affecting the dry signal. So, for instance, on this reverb, on this vocal, I've actually just cut out a lot of low end and a lot of high end, which I usually do when processing my reverbs. That way my vocal reverb don't muddy up the rest of the track, and by cutting a lot of the highs, I get a smoother sound. What this also does is make sure that vocal is in front of the reverb and the reverb is sitting behind. Listen to this reverb in solo with and without the EQ. Now with the EQ and cutting highs and lows. Tip number 4 is all about track stacks. I use track stacks to organize the main elements in my song: drums, bass, vocals, instruments and effects, but I also use them when I want to process multiple instruments the same way. For example, in this song I have multiple electric guitars. And by putting all these guitars into one track stack, I can actually compress the guitars together, and I can add microshift to all the guitars, which makes it sound more cohesive. A lot of times when I program my drums, I add percussion and hat loops from Splice. And this next tip is about time stretching loops to fit your tempo. Because if I go into Splice and I search percussion like I did here, I will find loops, but most of them won't fit my tempo. So for example, my song is in 70 BPM, and I can find a loop in Splice. Okay, let's grab this one. Now, to actually fit this loop into my song, I have to press Command and hover over the right hand side of the clip. And then I want to drag that clip out to the nearest end of a 4 or 8 bar period. And now this shaker is going to work in my tempo. So tell me, will you leave? 'Cause I'm risking it all for you. Now, this loop wasn't the perfect example for a great loop in my project, but you get the point. You can actually stretch loops to fit in your project. Tip number 6 is latching your automation. Let's say I want to filter these electric guitars and slowly bring the filter up. By latching down here, choosing latch, I can actually do that in real time and just move the filter up. Right there, listen now. And now I actually wrote that automation into the track without drawing a line. I actually just did it by hand. I actually find that latching your automations can make the automation more musical, and sometimes it's just easier to grab latch instead of going in and drawing the automation. Now the next tip, clip gating, is essential when you're mixing and editing your vocals. Say you want to remove a breath from a vocal, for example, but you don't want to get completely rid of it. To do that, I'm first going to grab the Marquee Tool by pressing down Command, and I'm going to select this breath and just click to make a cut, and then I'm going to go up here where it says region, and I'm going to turn down the gain. This way, I'm going to make the breath a little bit quieter. Myself, or will you? Hear that? It was like this before. Myself, or will you? So now I'm turning that down to taste, and I'm still preserving the authenticity of the performance, because you can actually hear the singer breathe a little bit. Myself, or will you? And then just remember to go in and crossfade these things when you cut. Myself, or will you? Now, when we're first talking about editing vocals, sometimes these breaths can be very hard to see. So what you want to do is you want to go to this button right here, and you can make the waveforms bigger and zoom in. That way you can actually see what you're working with on those breaths and those small sounds you want to remove. So just change this around when you're editing vocals. This doesn't actually do anything with the gain, it just zooms in and out of the waveform and makes it bigger or smaller. Now make sure to fade in and fade out all your clips, guys, and do crossfades between a clip that is cut. If you don't do this, then you're actually gonna get clicks and pops most of the time, and this is one of the biggest mistakes you can do that makes you sound like an amateur. Now, before I show you my template and how it works, I want to show you two more tips. The first one is about using low latency monitoring mode when you're recording in a big project. Just go to Customize Control Bar and Display and choose low latency monitoring mode. A lot of producers play some type of instrument, and I do that myself, but I also know that most producers don't play perfectly. Now, what you can do to fix the timing of a performance is you can go to Enable Flex down here, and you can choose Rhythmic. And then you can go in and actually drag down here where it pops up 3 of these kind of arrows or cones, and you want to drag the note that's out to the grid. I want to drag that to the bar. And also this one I can see slightly up to the right, so I want to drag that as well to the left. So there I fixed the timing, and without, with. Again, just make sure you're dragging down here and not up here, because when you drag down here, you only affect this section and not the rest of the clip. Now let's get into the last tip. You can see in this project that I've organized all my elements into vocals, lead vocals, and dubs and harmonies. Then I have drums, bass, my instruments, which is piano, synths, and guitars, and my effects, which are sweeps and different kind of impact sounds. Now let me show you how I replicated my template with only Logic stock plugins, and I'm gonna leave a free download in the description so you can download this template and get better sounding productions right away and much faster. So in my case, my template is not loaded with drum sounds, bass sounds, or synth sounds, but it's just a way of organizing tracks where I can have certain types of vocal chains ready to go. I have a vocal recording track right here where I can record and then drag stuff down into my lead spots where I have some tune, some simple EQ, and a de-esser ready to go. This just saves a lot of time in a session with an artist, and it just minimizes that fumbling, and you don't have to start mixing something when you're just creating an idea and you're not really finalizing a song. So for all my leads, I've created a track stack, which is called Lead Vox, where I just have some compression, some EQ, and some de-essing again, and I've loaded up some verbs ready to go if I need them. And also have another track stack, which is for the background vocals. It actually has the same starting point and the same chain, but usually I tweak this a little bit differently. Maybe I de-ess a little bit harder, or add some widening to just make those background vocals sit a little bit out to the side. And I also have a track stack for the sends. So I can actually go in and automate the volume of the sends if I want more reverb in the chorus and less reverb in the verse. So I can just go in, drag the reverb A down in the verse, and then maybe I want some more in this section, and I'll just grab it and we got more reverb. For the drums and the bass, I'm actually not doing anything. I've just made a track stack so I can put all my drum elements into this one and all my bass elements into this one. And doing things this way will make it easier to balance drums, bass, instruments and effects and vocals, because I won't have to actually balance all the individual elements. I can just balance the whole group. Now for the mix bus, I usually have some plugins on from the start. A little compression, maybe a little bit of multiband, and boosting a little bit of top. And then I have a limiter, which just makes my whole mix louder. And that way you can actually get a more finished sound earlier in the process, which can be very inspiring if you're in the studio with an artist and you're just trying to figure out an idea. Now, as I said earlier, you can actually download this template for free in the description. I really want you to make music faster in 2024, and I really know that this template can do that for you. Now, if you want to know how to produce a professional track in detail, you gotta watch my remake of Greedy and Water. In those remakes, I show you my thought process when replicating a professional track, and I show you how I process things and how I make it sound that good.